The Apollo view layer is agnostic. That means we don't care what you use. We have two tight-knit integrations, one with React and one with Angular 2. Angular 2 one is looking really nice, so if you're an Angular developer and you like that stuff, it's looking really good. I personally like React Apollo, and so that's what we're going to talk about. I'm just going to give you like a step-by-step process to connecting data in React. And it's a really simple example. Who here in the old days of Meteor, you did Meteor create, and the first thing you saw was you've clicked this button 10, something times, and you click the button and it goes up. All right, that's the app I built. So hard, right? So let's focus on presentation. That's what I always recommend. If you're an Apollo developer, let's call you that now. Focus on the presentation first, because that's what matters. That's your job. Focus on presentation. So this counter button is so pretty. It has a paragraph tag, and a button. Dang, complex UI right there. But it shows a point. Like this is the presentational UI component. It doesn't do anything else but render this stuff. Okay. And stateless components are the shit. So you should use them if you're using React. Understand your data. So once you built the UI and how you want it, you know you want to put certain pieces of data here and there. Go to graphical and understand your data. That's step 2. Go see what you need. In this case, I want to get the count, right? So I looked for count, when it was updated at. Can you see that? Yeah. And then maybe the ID. And on the right, it says, okay, my count is like 38. There was no updated at, so that's a bug. And the ID. Step 3, connect your queries. So React Apollo ships something very similar to Redux called connect. It gets confusing if you're already using Redux because they also have a function called connect. We're working on it. So from connect, from a React Apollo, it essentially takes GraphQL queries using that GQL syntax I was talking about, which is just a string, and allows you to return data to the component. So you can see at the bottom of the example on the right, we are exporting a connected component. What connect does is it wraps that presentational component, that beautiful counter button, it wraps it in another component, like hidden from you, so you don't have to worry about the implementation. You can just have fun building the cool UI. And what the container component does, what this connect does, is it will go ask GraphQL for the data, and it will actually give you back this data as a prop. And in this case, I named it poorly because I named the data prop data. So never name things data because it's super confusing. Step 4 is actually set up the Apollo client, which is super simple. You just import, obviously you npm install Apollo client, but you just import Apollo client, and then you instantiate it with the new, the new syntax, a new Apollo client. You use this thing called the Apollo provider, which is similar to React Redux in terms of a provider. What a provider does is just gives the context for any child component. So if I have a provider at the top level root of my app, every component that's in that tree of components has access to the Apollo client. So this allows you to connect any component you want, 500 components down or 1 component down or wherever. As long as the top level component is a provider, you're providing the client to all components. So that's what a provider is. And we took this from Redux. We didn't invent it. Redux had this concept of providers and stuff like that. So we just needed a way that every component can get the client. That's easy. So we instantiate it. All right. So let's talk about mutations. I wrote this slide before, like 5 minutes before the presentation, because we didn't talk about mutations today. I blame Lauren. But I wanted to talk about mutations today. So mutations is just another type, right? Like Lauren talked about GraphQL types. There's a type called mutation, and it allows you to write mutations. Whoa. I wrote a mutation on the left here called increment count. It takes an ID, which is like the ID of my count object in MongoDB, and it's going to do something with it. But all it's going to do is return a string. That's the return type I said right there. Increment count ID string. So string has to be an ID, and the return value is going to be a string. And mutations also have resolvers. So on the right, I'm resolving increment count by what? I'm doing a counts.update. The ID that I pass in, I'm incrementing the count by 1, and updating the updated app value. This is Meteor right here. This is like plain old Meteor stuff, so you guys should know that. And then in the same vein, we're building up functions to handle mutations for us. So the first function I wrote was generate a mutation object. You don't have to do this. I just thought it was cleaner to isolate the different components of a mutation. So first you need the mutation query. So here I'm just returning an object with the GQL tag that's just saying mutation. I name my mutation create count, which is super confusing. I regret doing that now. And I'm returning increment count, which is the actual mutation name. You don't need to name your mutations. I'm just a confusing person. So second function I wrote here was dispatch increment mutation. This is just another, just wanted to show you a little piece of it. You don't have to write these functions. Just wanted to show you the different piece. So this is actually showing the example of refetch. So when you dispatch an increment mutation, essentially you're just calling some mutation. Mutations are promises, so they have .then, the ability to do .then on them. And then, so essentially what this reads is, I'm going to do some mutation, and in the callback of my promise, I'm going to refetch the data. So essentially, the counter will go up, and then the number will increment, and that's my reactivity right there. I purposely am doing refetch. If I didn't do refetch, the counter wouldn't go up. Also, you could do polling in this case, or you don't have to do refetch. You can just poll, and the number will go up in like 1 second or something like that. But in a counter app, you kind of want it to go up right away. And on the right, the last function is map mutations to props. All this does is similar to Redux. It just says, hey, I want a prop in my component called increment, and what it means, that prop, what its value is actually the mutation itself. So in this case, that mutation object we built. And then let there be data. So let me show you guys the app because it's so complex. Right here. Can you guys see this? Bigger? Dang. That's tough to see. Look, though. Oh, my God. So magical. Let me show you some real magic, though. All right, I have this thing called Redux Dev Tools. You guys see that inspector right there? It's a Chrome extension. If you're using Redux, you should download this. It makes your life easier. So I'm going to put this on the side here. Let's make it bigger for everyone to see. And let's refresh the page so we're good. Okay, so you can see, as a client developer, I don't want to be console logging all the time to know my state changes. That's whack. So this is great. This is the Redux Dev Tools. So you can see that the first action here was an init. And what does init do? It's just a type, nothing, just signifying that the Apollo client is starting up. And the first action we have is Apollo query init. And now you can actually read what this query is doing. Can you guys see that? I don't know if I can. Oh, I can. Dope. All right, so you can see that we have this thing called query string, which is that ugly string that you have to deal with, you don't have to deal with. So Apollo client will transform that for you. You can see the actual query you made. So this is the root query. What type is it? Query. Selection set. You can go into all this data about what you just did. Right? So that's just the query. And then the results. So now you want to know if, you want to debug, like what happened here. Okay, let's go. Let's see what the result was. Data. Okay, there's some counts. Okay, the count is 19. Awesome. Great. So now I know exactly how my data got to the client. Let's go increment this by 1. Now it's 20. You should see, oh, look, mutation happened. So it's a mutation's happening. So you can see, once again, what was the mutation string I passed in? Okay, great. What are the variables I passed in? I think I passed in ID. You can see that. So you can really understand how your client's working. And if you have bugs, you can debug them without console logs or debuggers. You can look into the dev tools and see how state changes and maybe grok in your head maybe I did something wrong here. And then you can see the mutation result, right? And the result from my mutation was 1 because that's how many documents were updated, right? When you return a counts.update, it returns the number of documents affected by the update. That's what I returned here. There's only 1 document, so it's 1. And then the query, it's all unidirectional, so the query goes up again, and you get the result because I called refetch, right? I called refetch on purpose to get the data updated. So you can see now, if I go into data, the count should be 20. Boom, done.